Tomorrow we'll find out if Queenslanders vote to keep the current Labor government or vote for change and give the LNP a go. With an opinion poll showing the race has tightened, both leaders are talking down the prospect of minority government. The LNP has 35 seats but needs at least 12 more to win outright.
Riding the wave to election day. Stephen Miles revving through southeast Queensland in quintessential Gold Coast style.
Not my first time, no, and I do have a licence. So.
He's sporting a wide grin for someone who went into the campaign well behind.
Getting sentimental. Don't want it to be over.
Confidently blitzing electorates.
How many cooks does it take to cook this sausage?
And reiterating his key pitch.
Who do you trust to do two things? Continue to address the cost of living and deliver a plan for our state's future.
It was an earnest David Crisafulli on the hustings.
Good work to do yet.
In a sea of red, but among friends.
Good luck for tomorrow, mate.
The federal opposition leader making the case for an LNP ally at the helm.
I think Queensland's ready for a fresh start.
David Crisafulli also greeting the governor, who he hopes to see on Monday to form government. Also hitting key seats, saying it's time for change.
Because nothing will change if we get more of the same from a fourth-term re-elected Labor government.
While the opinion polls have consistently suggested the LNP is poised for victory, this latest polling indicates the contest has tightened.
A minority government is not out of the question. Unlikely, but not out of the question.
But on election eve, the opposition leader has shifted the goalposts on his key promise on youth crime, staking his job on the numbers.
Opposition leader, your biggest campaign promise is that crime will be lower under the LNP and there'll be fewer victims year on year if you're elected. If you fail to do that, will you resign as Premier?
You bet.
But today, adding a caveat.
There's got to be fewer victims, and fewer victims means less victims per your population, clearly.
So he's chosen a different statistic, and now he's given himself 3 body lengths of wriggle room by saying that he meant per capita. He clearly didn't mean per capita.
The leaders campaigning in full throttle.
You want to go for a drive now?
On the home stretch.
Let's drive this all the way to the end.
Kate McKenna, ABC News.
Political reporter Jack Mackay has been on the campaign trail for the last month. Jack, are the leaders still out looking for votes tonight?
They are, Ellen. The opposition leader, David Crisafulli, has just wrapped up another campaign event here in Capalaba, speaking with local candidates and volunteers. He'll now hit the phones tonight, canvassing for votes, before getting up early tomorrow morning to do a blitz of seats. The opposition leader won't be casting his own vote in his Gold Coast-based electorate of Broadwater. Instead, you can expect to see him in a Labor-held seat that the LNP is targeting at this election. As for Premier Stephen Miles, he'll walk to his local polling booth tomorrow with his wife Kim from their Mango Hill home to cast his vote. These latest polling results really have buoyed Labor's expectations. They're now hoping to retain more seats than they initially anticipated at the outset of this election campaign. We'll find out tomorrow what that looks like. Voting centres will open from 8 a.m. Ellen.
Thanks, Jack. And with the clock ticking, just how are voters across Queensland feeling, and have they made up their minds? Well, we've crisscrossed the state to find out.
With the 50-cent buses, it's definitely helped with getting around to work and doing stuff, seeing family more often now. So that's really good that the budgeting has been cut lower, and the taxes too, that's been going down. That's really good. I'm very happy with Labor for doing that, actually.
And I work in community services, and other co-workers are like, you vote for the Liberal? And I was like, yeah, because they're doing things. Labor's to hand out rather than hand up.
This state election, I would really like to see some policies being put forward that addresses disability inclusion and help to minimise the barriers faced by people living in rural and regional Australia.
I've always had a Liberal point of view on the election, so like it's my turn to vote, so I've got a Liberal point of view.
The Labor campaign is some negative, not happy with the way they approached it. They should be dealing with issues like the commercial fishing industry, which has been destroyed by their policies.
I've not supported major parties for almost 2 decades now. I voted One Nation number 1 and Family First number 2 and the Greens last.
But I really do feel like it's time for a change. I think that the Labor government have had a really good go, but I also am a public servant, which creates other issues as far as, if the LNP get in, what are they going to do?
Well, I just want to vote for whoever's not in party now, just because of the way the economy is going and all the youth crime and everything that's happening. I want to try and step away from that and go someone else, like maybe the Greens or One Nation.
My key issues are the rental and housing crisis and also women's healthcare. I am really terrified by the idea of a party getting in that doesn't view abortion as an essential part of women's healthcare.
Out of the 2 major parties, I feel like both candidates haven't created long-term solutions to the current problems that we're facing. Majority of the policies that they've implemented or are willing to implement are just short-term solutions.
That was some of the voters of Queensland speaking from all around the state. We invited the Premier and the opposition leader in for a final pitch to our ABC viewers. They both agreed. Let's start with the LNP. Earlier, I spoke with David Crisafulli. David Crisafulli, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ellen.
The Labor government's been in power for nearly 10 years. You went into this campaign firm favourite. You're ending it with the polls at least showing you may only just squeak into government tomorrow. What do you think went wrong?
Elections are always tough, and Queenslanders need to know that we are offering a fresh start for them, and it's going to be a tough battle. It's going to be a battle right to the end. We're working very, very hard. We are united, we're focused, we're disciplined, but if Queenslanders want that fresh start, they've got to vote for change. And we are trying to create history. We need to win over a dozen seats. That doesn't just happen. And I'm urging Queenslanders, if you want to stop a 4th-term re-elected Labor government that will have been in power for 14 years, if you want to stop the prospect of a minority Labor government propped up by extreme Greens at one end of the state and chaotic Katters at the other, the only way you can do that is vote for a majority LNP government. And we are offering that hope for the future. We're offering a fresh start that this state really, really needs.
The polls today were a surprise, I imagine a shock for the LNP, showing your personal approval rating going backwards, the LNP's approval rating going backwards. So the more Queenslanders have seen of you and the party over the course of this campaign, it seems the less they've liked you. Was the small target approach a mistake, do you think, or was it a mistake not to give a definitive early answer on abortion?
Alan, polls have never been the numbers that have driven me. I've always been listening to Queenslanders, and Queenslanders tell me keep going because we want to see change. Queenslanders tell me they want an end to the chaos and the crisis that they've seen. Now, I know the Labor Party will describe that, but what we've done is focus on the big 4 crises that Queenslanders have told us they want action on: youth crime, health, housing and cost of living. And we have put forward comprehensive plans for all of them. For every one of those big 4 crises, we've had third parties stand beside us and back us in with what we are proposing. That's a refreshing change from a government that has made knee-jerk decisions.
All right, this is your opportunity to tell us what we're getting. I mean, you're talking about third parties standing alongside you, backing in your policies. On healthcare, you've said you're listening to the experts. You're trusting the experts in the system. You're a Gold Coast MP. Why won't you listen to the experts on pill testing, particularly with schoolies coming up? Why won't you listen to the experts on drug diversion programs?
We've put our position across on that, and I don't want to roll the welcome mat out for drugs. What I will do for the health system is put doctors and nurses back in charge, and within 100 days... But there's the doctors and nurses who are saying, with respect, Mr Crisafulli, that pill testing saves lives. The drug diversion programs gives people with small amounts of drugs a second, even a third chance, and means police resources aren't used up chasing after small amounts of drugs. That's what the experts say. Well, Alan, there's mixed views on that, and I speak to a lot of police who have a very, very different view of that, and I speak to a lot of health professionals who have a very different view on that. Our priority for the health system is, at the moment, ambulance ramping is at 45%, and we want to get it down below 30%, and we've put forward a plan to do that. Within 100 days, Queenslanders will see in real time what's happening in their hospitals. There's a difference between what a government says it's going to do and what it does.
Okay.
And I take a vastly different approach.
All right.
I believe in KPIs
and you've held yourself to a very strict KPI. You said, quote, if victim numbers do not reduce in this state, you will quit. Today you're saying you won't resign if victim numbers go off. Do I have that correctly?
No, absolutely. I stand by that commitment, and allow me to unpack why it's so important. When you factor in the fact that the population over that period has grown by less than 20%, and yet we've had assaults up by nearly 200%, 198%. We've had stolen cars up 101%. That shows you why there are more victims of crime. And in the last 12 months in Queensland, there were 289,657 victims of crime in Queensland. Now, that's more than Victoria and New South Wales, despite the fact that their populations are so much larger than ours.
So to be clear, your answer is no.
Victims.
To be clear, your answer is no on election eve. If the raw numbers go up, you will not resign. Your commitment, you are saying today, clarifying today, is on a per capita basis. Is that correct?
And quite clearly, based on the fact that it's increased at 10 times population growth in some of those metrics, Queenslanders would respect that we are determined to do things better. And there will be fewer victims. And I'm willing to put my leadership on that because that's what Queenslanders have told me. They are sick of a government that does not accept accountability. The only way things won't change, the only way you'll get more of the same is a fourth-term government.
Yeah, I'm still not clear on that answer, but I think I've asked you a couple of times there. Let me come to the issue of abortion that has dogged this campaign, certainly for the LNP throughout this 4 weeks. You've said that criminalising abortion is not on the LNP's agenda, but the agenda is set by whomever brings a bill to Parliament. You can control whether it becomes law based on how your members vote, and that depends on how you let them vote. Will you give them a conscience vote on the issue?
There will be no changes to the abortion laws.
I understand,
and you mentioned about
but
the agenda.
If a bill is brought to Parliament, will you allow your backbenchers a conscience vote on that matter?
Well, my team has all said we will not be changing those laws, and I want Queenslanders to hear that directly from me. And you mentioned about whether or not there might be another bill. Well, the Catters who said they were going to do that have withdrawn that, and yet the scare campaign from the Labor Party has continued. So I want Queenslanders to hear it directly from me. There will be no change to abortion laws in Queensland.
Final question. The LNP have presented themselves as better economic managers. That's the pitch. You say you'll fund no less than $6.8 billion in savings by getting rid of external consultants and letting the public service do the work. Does that mean that, unlike the last LNP government in Queensland, there'll be more public servants under a government you lead?
Well, we do need more public servants, Alan. It's clear. Service delivery in Queensland is faltering, and we need more doctors and nurses and teachers and police and fireys. We've also committed to saving a bucket load of money, in fact, several billions of dollars into the forwards, by making sure we can create a world-class public service, and that the days of shopping out to those multinational Big Four becomes a thing of the past. There is a strong desire for the Queensland Public Service to be part of service delivery.
And if you fall short of a majority tomorrow night, would you be happy to rely on what you've called the chaotic Katter Party for confidence and supply?
No, Ellen, and I've ruled that out. And in contrast, the Premier has changed positions on this multiple times. There are deals being done at both ends of the state, and that means that things won't go through the Parliament. It would be chaos. We can't afford a fourth term of this government, and we can't afford more of the same. And we are offering a fresh start. We're offering Queenslanders the opportunity to vote for that fresh start. But they have to vote for the LNP if they want that change. Anything else will lead to more of the same and a chaotic Parliament.
Mr Crisafulli, it's been a long campaign. You've brought enormous energy and commitment to the democratic process. We thank you so much for your time tonight.
Alan, thank you for yours, and I'm always grateful for the opportunity to be on the show. Thank you.
Joining me now live from Runcorn State High School, north of Brisbane, is the Premier, Stephen Miles. Thanks so much for being with us. A busy day today, Premier.
It has been a big day. Thanks for having me.
Now, you've just heard David Crisafulli say Labor would consider a minority government with Katter's Australian Party and with the Greens. Would you ever consider that, to be clear?
No. But what we do know is that David Crisafulli has a deal with the Katter Party and with Pauline Hanson's One Nation. Imagine what that coalition would look like. David Crisafulli, Jared Blay, Robbie Katter and Pauline Hanson. That would be a terrible government.
OK, he says he wouldn't do that and you would. To be clear, you're saying you won't entertain minority government confidence and supply from the Katter Party, One Nation or the Greens?
No, I've been very clear. No deals, no coalition.
OK. The polls are showing that your personal standing in Labor's position has improved over the 4 weeks of the campaign. Would you be in a better position today, do you think, if Anastasia Palaszczuk had stood aside earlier to let voters get to know you better?
Oh, look, it's not really possible to kind of go back in time and reassess what might have happened. It's very hypothetical. What I know is that I've made the most of every day I've had the chance. And so these 10 months I've worked really hard. I've aimed to deliver for Queenslanders and really to show them what kind of leader I would be if I had a term in my own right. And that's what I'm asking for tomorrow, is a mandate to keep doing the kinds of things I've been doing these last 10 months. Things like 50-cent fares, things like school lunches, things like using the coal royalties to deliver energy rebates. OK. If the polls are correct, you seem to have campaigned very well. Your own personal standing has improved, Labor's standing has improved. Given the issues with crime and health and housing pressures, actually, why haven't you been able to govern in that 10 months as effectively as you've campaigned for the past 4 weeks? Well, over those 10 months, we've delivered comprehensive plans on all of those issues, and they are all working. So you mentioned community safety. The Queensland Police Service data has shown a reduction in crime since that new plan was put in place. Now, David Crisafulli doesn't want to accept that. He flatly rejected the Queensland Police Service data and instead keeps choosing his own new data, and even today is moving the goalposts on how he will hold himself to account for that, for those victim numbers. On all of those other issues, our housing plan is delivering a record amount of social housing. Our health plan is an 11% increase in the budget, including including a commitment we've made at this election to build 50 new bulk billing GP clinics, to expand bulk billing. We have a plan to continue to guarantee the lowest energy prices and a plan to cap fuel increases. So we have done a lot in 10 months and we've outlined a lot for the next 4 years. Well, let's just dive into health a little bit there. Why would you need another 4 years to get hospital waiting lists back to pre-COVID levels? That's what your health minister said. I mean, COVID was years ago, Premier. Well, our waiting lists are back to pre-COVID levels, actually. The measure that we've struggled most to address is patient off stretcher time, and that's a very complicated hospital flow issue that requires delivery of more beds, and it takes time to build more hospitals to deliver those more beds. But across most of the measures... At base, though, this is what Queenslanders will be asking tonight if they haven't decided how to vote, right? They'll be thinking, these guys have had 9 years. Why do they need another 4 to get the basics right? Well, across all of the other measures, our health system leads all of the other states and territories. Median wait time at our EDs is only 15 minutes. We are the only mainland state that has an entirely free ambulance service, and so our ambulance, as well as our emergency departments, they do a really good job dealing with that demand. But to properly ease the pressure, we need those expanded hospitals and we need more primary care, and that's why we've taken this unprecedented step of moving into primary care, which, as you know, is traditionally a responsibility of the Australian government. OK. On crime, the statistics show nearly half of all crimes against people in Queensland are committed by an intimate partner. Nearly 57% of all assaults are domestic violence assaults. Was it a mistake to allow the LNP to shift the focus, to shift the debate to youth crime? Well, it is disappointing. We don't entirely control how that conversation occurs, and the LNP have been quite determined to ignore domestic violence, which, as you say, is the majority of offences and takes up a lot of police time. When they were last in office, they excluded domestic violence victims from the data that David points to, and so when he points to that big increase in victims, that's partly because we now include domestic violence victims. They said at the time they only wanted to include the victims that matter. I increased domestic violence funding by 20% this year for those services to make sure that they could meet that demand, and I think what people know is that when it comes to addressing domestic and sexual violence, that's a real priority for the Labor Party, whereas the LNP see crime as an opportunity to win seats.
And hand on heart, given what you're spending on new child jails, do you really think that you yourself have given sufficient consideration, sufficient emphasis to the impacts of domestic and family violence in this state?
It's been a real focus for me through this year, but also through the period of time that I was the health minister. Obviously, there are significant crossovers with health services, mental health services, alcohol and other drug services. So it has been something that I've worked on, but it's also something where your job is never done. Any domestic violence is too much domestic violence. So I'll keep focused on it.
We're trying to ensure this interview goes about the same length of time as the previous one. So a couple of quick questions. You've promised $1.4 billion for school lunches. Principals are worried about how to deliver it. You even suggested Meals on Wheels might come to the rescue. Then there's the promises on the petrol stations. Are these the sorts of promises that you make when you don't expect to govern, you don't expect to have to deliver?
Not at all. That's the kind of scepticism I got when I announced 50-cent fares, and they've been enormously successful and people love them. And I'm very confident that we can provide an economy, a successful economy like Queensland's, can provide one good nutritious meal to every one of our kids in a state school. Sure, there'll be complications. There'll be some schools where it's harder than others. Some schools will have to outsource it. Some will deliver it like we do on Mornington Island. But I think that's something we're capable of.
Yeah. Final question. Given how volatile politics are in Australia, if Labor loses tomorrow, would you hold out hope of becoming the Premier of Queensland again?
Look, that's something to worry about on Sunday and for the next 4 years. I haven't had much time to turn my mind to that. I've been very focused on winning every vote and on pointing out to Queensland the risks associated with the LNP. I mean, I listened to that interview you just did with David Crisafulli, and he couldn't give you a straight answer to anything. And if you want to be the Premier, you really do need to earn people's trust.
Premier, you've fought a tough campaign with energy and commitment, and we thank you for your time and your commitment to democracy.
Thank you so much.
Well, polls close at 6 tomorrow night, and that's when the vote count will begin. It's also when our election broadcast kicks off on ABC TV, ABC News Channel and iView. Jessica Van Vonderen will be leading the coverage along with a panel of political experts. Jess, talk us through it.
Hello and welcome to the ABC Election Centre here at South Bank. This is actually usually the performance space of the Queensland Symphony Orchestra, and just like any good musical score, election night promises to hold plenty of drama. It all begins at 6 p.m. Queensland time, and we go live to bring you the count as it unfolds. Our panel: political strategist Cos Samaras and Tony Barry, LNP Senator Susan McDonald, the Treasurer and Deputy Premier Cameron Dick, David Spears, he's my co-host for the night, David Janetsky, the LNP's Shadow Treasurer, and Federal Labor MP and Aged Care Minister Annika Wells, along with our state political reporter Rachel Stewart, who'll be interviewing candidates all across Queensland. But the man doing the numbers and making the call is, of course, the ABC's election analyst, Anthony Green. Anthony, great to have you in Brizzy. What's the current state of play?
Well, just look at that chamber, the starting position for tonight, the starting grid is the Labor Party's got 51 seats, you need 47 for majority government. The LNP's 35, Katter's Australia Party 4, 2 Greens and the 1 independent from Noosa. Now, if Labor loses 5 seats, a swing of about 3.5%, it's lost its majority. The LNP need 12 seats for majority government. Polls early in the campaign were indicating they'll easily get there, but some of the later polls, of course, have showed a tighter position.
So where will this election be won and lost?
Well, the battle will be fought in the government's marginal seats, which means when you look at the marginal seats, a lot of them are in regional Queensland. They're not in Brisbane. You've got Bundaberg, Nicklin, Hervey Bay, Caloundra. There were those peculiar pickups for the government last time. You've got Barron River, the 3 seats in Townsville, Redlands, which is east of Brisbane, and Aspley, the first, and Palmerston, the first of those northern Brisbane seats. But then you've got Cairns, Keppel, Redcliffe. You get into 5.6, 5.7. That's the sort of uniform swing the government needs, the LNP needs to get into government, now into majority government. Beyond there's some more regional seats, but the marginal seats in Brisbane are all on 6, 7, 8%. They're much tougher to get into. But if the LNP wants to have a secure majority, it may need that larger swing to win some seats in Brisbane, so it doesn't end up looking like a government for regional Queensland.
Anthony, should be fascinating. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much. And hope you can tune in from 6 p.m. Queensland time.